Great. It
Oh,
is such a pleasure having you here.
uh,
And to everybody that isn't here, I introduce you to Diane Geerlinks. So she really is, I would say, a bolster for confidence in
well, thank
homeschooling.
you.
Yeah, I mean, you've been
Yeah,
homeschooling 5 kids for about 25 years, and then you started homeschooling grandkids,
kind of.
kind of.
Then I started my own practice, and yes, now I'm constantly being consulted by the children about their children.
Yeah, beautiful. How lucky of them for them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. I was actually this morning homeschooling.
Yeah, there you go.
My daughter called and said, I need some help. So I ran over, and lo and behold, I'm doing math and journal and handwriting. And
So there's a reason to keep our homeschool libraries then? It's for the grandkids?
yeah, and surprisingly enough, it happens quicker than you think. Before you know it, you're there. And there's lots of stuff I got rid of that I bought again.
Really? Okay, just convince me not to sell anything.
I mean, partly because I'm in private practice and I use it with other people's kids. But yes, even for my own, my kids are always asking me, Mom, where is that? Okay.
Wow, that is amazing, an amazing resource. I just today
Mm.
moved my husband into our homeschool room because we homeschool everywhere. And it's really become a resource room with cat litter and sometimes the great peer if she's barking too much. So I cleaned it all out. It's a beautiful space for his office now. So
Oh, nice.
with all the homeschool books.
He can have a shelf, maybe.
He has 3 shelves now. That is like
Oh, well, then he should be thankful.
3 shelves of about 25 shelves. Yeah, not unlike the
Uh,
clothing closet. Yeah.
yes.
So it's such a pleasure having you here. I would love it if you would introduce yourself to the Homeschool Mama support group here so that they know where you're from, what you do to help other homeschool moms.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I've homeschooled all these years, and through those years, I spoke at lots of homeschooling conferences, and I would say at that time, my topic was about unit study,
Love it.
how to, that was my passion, homeschooling, math, read, language here, but really digging into a topic. And then, as I continued homeschooling, I had a child who learned differently or didn't learn to read as easily as the others. And I was
Mhm.
sure that it must be me. And so that took a journey. And I trained then, he was at the end of our homeschool years. And so I trained as an educational therapist and with NILD Canada. And following that, I set up a practice. I mean, I never, if you would have told me that I would be doing this and teaching other people's kids after mine were done, I would have said, you are crazy. But I did. And I loved it. And it's my passion. And so I set up my own practice as Geerlinks Educational Therapy and support. I have 5 therapists that work with me, and we support homeschooling as well as schooled kids that learn differently and neurodiverse who might have, diagnosis of ADHD or learning disability or autism or whichever, but also so homeschool and school children. And then I continue to support the homeschool community and recently just started a membership for my own for homeschoolers of unique
Yeah.
learners. So yeah,
So
it's
I would
very
love to,
fun.
yeah, I'm so glad that you joined that or that you created a community, that you created resources for all these families that have differently wired kids, or you said unique learners. You still there? Well, we will just wait. Hey, nice to see you. It happens. I can't hear you.
There.
There.
I don't know. All of a sudden you froze. I was like, oh, I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're back.
Okay. Yeah. So let's carry on.
Yeah.
Now I can't remember your question just before we quit.
So unique learners or different wired kiddos. What would you say?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
what are we? Who are they?
Who are you engaging really? Because I heard you just say
Ah,
autism spectrum, and I think of you as the mom, the homeschool mom, the educational therapist that engages families that have kids that have arithmetic, reading, writing challenges.
yeah. I would say because we serve, I mean, educational therapy really is looking at those underlying areas,
Yeah,
but not, I mean, we teach reading, writing, and math through that. So we're really looking at teaching kids how to learn,
yeah,
no matter what their abilities are, because our premise is, or our belief is, that the brain can change. And so it doesn't really matter where they're at now. We're going to move them up to that next level. And so it's
yeah,
really based on that theory. Now, do we work with developmentally delayed? That is my earlier prechild children background. And so I can, but I would say the majority is kiddos that are normal
yeah,
in what we might think, and we look at them, and yet we say, why can't they learn this? So they have average to above average intelligence, right? We're not talking about intelligence, we're talking about they can't show what they know.
right.
And so we're going to help them develop their thinking, work on their expression so that they can make these connections.
So if I was a mom coming into your practice with my child, what is it? I know there's a broad spectrum here, but what are the most frequent challenges that moms are seeing with their kids that worries them and gets them to actually move toward you?
Yeah, mostly it's, how it exemplifies itself is either behavior,
Yeah,
like my kid can't focus. I taught this yesterday. Why can't, we taught it last week and they seem to get it. Why don't they have it now? So that, but I would say reading, because reading is the area, reading or math, but it are the areas that where we really see the problem. We might not understand what's underneath that all, but we're like, why can't this child read? I thought it was just normal. Everybody learns. So that would be I would think our biggest, the telltale sign that, oh my goodness, this is not as easy as I thought.
so when you say not reading, what age are you sort of categorizing? Because I know that there's no fixed age. You should be able to read by such and such a date. Different
Mm,
kids just have different pensions.
sure. I would say we get age 7 and 8
Hmm.
to, unfortunately, to like 15 or 16,
Right.
where people, and I say that without judgment, because guess what?
That was you
I
too.
was the one who didn't bring my child to, like, I homeschooled, and I just figured eventually he'll get it.
Right.
And he was 15 before I finally got him assessed and went, oh my goodness, like, okay,
You
this is
didn't
too
realize.
far.
Yeah.
And then I've had lots of regret. And I would say a lot of homeschool parents know, when they're 8. You might say, you might hear and believe, oh, they're going to learn at their own pace.
Yeah.
Everybody else tells me they're going to get it. But
Yeah.
usually you as the parent, and I certainly did, knew like,
Something's up.
this is not like, really, I've taught them all these things. Why is it not coming together for them?
Right. Yeah.
And so, yeah. And so I think we wait too long. And we wait too long to get support. It doesn't mean, it's kind of like, do you need to wait till your arm's broken?
Yeah. Mhm.
Which part do you say, actually, it's been hurting for a long time, when we just
Because
wait and wait and wait.
we're such independent families. The whole point of us homeschooling is like, we'll go do it and we'll go figure it out ourselves. And
Totally.
there's truth to that, except that you could be making it more challenging than you need to be.
Totally. And it's not even that you can't do it. I think there's lots of good resources out there to help you as a homeschool mom provide what your child needs.
Right.
So I'm not saying, oh, you have to go get a therapist immediately,
Mhm.
but you need to continue that search to say, what is it that's making this so challenging for this child when my other child just learned it?
Right. Yeah.
Right. And it could be auditory, it could be they just don't hear it. And often for reading, one of my questions will be, well, was it hard for them to remember their colors?
Mm. Because it's
Because,
a similar place in the
oh,
brain.
yeah, and even way back then, was the memory like, did they not follow the sounds? For instance, I was working with my 3-year-old grandchild recently, and his mom was saying to me, like, I'm just wondering if he's colorblind. Like, he doesn't remember the colors, and we keep talking about the colors. I mean, he's 3. Are you worried? No, but
Hmm.
you kind of just watch as
Hmm.
I'm playing with him. I'm like, he can match colors beautifully,
Right.
but he couldn't recall the name.
Hmm.
This is blue
Hmm.
and black.
Yeah.
But then when I bring up this, you know, it's blue and black, I have to remember that word. I mean, this could say be red.
It's a lovely mug, by the way. It
Thank you.
really is. I like it.
But right, they have to recall that name, and that's an auditory memory skill. And so the letter A, the letter F, recalling those letters, let alone the sounds of those letters, could be where the glitch is. And so we're really looking at where are these glitches?
And so you're hoping to kind of trust mom's spider sense. And at the same time, this is a unique scenario for auditory challenges in learning how to read. Are there
Sure,
other challenges?
absolutely. There could be visual challenges, right? The letters are moving around on the page. They
Mhm.
don't know that.
It is
They
what it
just think
is.
they just
Yeah,
think letters move.
right. They
And
do
you and I
incessantly. Yeah.
and you and I are like, well, I don't know, they stay still for me, but they don't think to tell you I can't see the letters because it keeps moving around. They just are like, oh, letters move. Right. So there are these visual clues or too many letters, right?
Mhm.
Or the tracking of the eyes from left to right. Like there could be so many little pieces that we look for to sort of say, okay, where are where is the little glitch that's making this challenging?
So what would I see? Would I just see a child fidgety and unwilling to sit down to read the thing?
Absolutely. That could easily be one thing. You might have a child who, cries every time or is rubbing their eyes every time. Or you
Mhm.
might see, you know, yesterday they knew those letters, but today they don't. Like they don't have that holding memory piece to bring it back. Doesn't
Right.
mean that they can't play memory game visually beautifully, right? So memory and memory can even be different. Right? Auditory memory is different than you told me, and now I've got to remember those steps. Let's say you tell me to go to my bedroom and get da 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 da. I have
Mhm.
to remember those steps compared to a visual memory game where I'm matching, and you're like, that child's amazing. They can just remember where those pieces are, and we're playing memory, and they always win. So their memory's fine.
Ah, yes.
But you're like, but when I tell them something, they don't, they can't recall it. So the name blue, you know, is harder to hold in their memory.
Very interesting. So what other elements? There's auditory, visual.
Yeah, there could be, even just getting their thinking organized. I mean, there's all these executive function skills, like just starting on the left side of the page and moving to the right, these things that we intuitively, as mamas, bring out a book and flip
Mhm.
it from this side. And so they've had a lot of those experiences, but yet they might have these reversals, right? So that whole piece of reversing, they're seeing it in mirror images. So again, it's visual. And that's why often I do a workshop on it's all about eyes or ears. I know
Mhm.
there's more, but that's such a big piece.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, that those executive function skills, which really are planning and organizing, and if, ADHD often will have these characteristics where they aren't self-regulating, let's say, and they're
Mhm.
jumping to conclusions, and they're jumping ahead to the end of the page when they haven't slowed themselves down to say, let's do letter by letter by letter. So that would be another area that might cause them struggle in learning to read or even to write
So
when
as a
you're told.
mom, when you refer to executive function, then I tend to think, and I know what that means, but I tend to think, oh, okay, so then I'll get them a day timer. Then I'll get them stickers, or I'm gonna, obviously a 6-year-old is not going to use a day timer. But is that helpful, or is there a more simplistic approach for a 7-year-old, say?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And here I'll give you another example. The grandchildren are great. This is why it's so great, because I have them and I'm seeing it happening in front of me
Yeah.
practically now. So this morning, I have a granddaughter who is 7, and her mom will say, like, she is often running to the reading and doing things, but she just doesn't focus. Like, I ask her to go do something, and she's lost along the way. No
Mhm.
diagnosis. There's just this, what do I do? It's so frustrating.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
today she had her list of, her checklist of all the things she had to do. And the top one says morning routine.
Yep.
So, well, what is that morning routine? Tell me about your morning routine. And she starts with her finger. Well, I have to get dressed, and then I have to make my bed, and then I have to brush my teeth. Anyway, she got all the way through to her 5.
Yes.
I said,
5. Yep.
so if you look at, so she had to remember that morning routine meant 5 things.
Mhm.
So I said, how do you remember that? I knew that this was a little bit of an issue. And so I said, well, what if you look at your hand? Could this one always mean make my bed? Right? Could this one always mean? And then she said, well, Mommy and I talked, and I'm going to make a bracelet. And on the bracelet is going to be different colors, which will help me remember all the things I have to do.
I love that.
And then when I'm done my first 5 things, now she has a chart that has first 5, second 5, right? Then I can move it to my other hand to remind me of what I have to do. So
Hmm.
again,
I have
simple,
to know how old she is, first of all, just to get a ball.
7,
She's 7.
7. But
Wow.
being able to help her move towards independence,
Yeah.
right? And in some of I think in my latest workshop I was presenting, I was talking about, that moving towards independence is going to take, really getting the responsibility off of you and onto them,
Right.
right?
Yes.
You don't want to have to tell her, did you brush your teeth?
At
Did you do
17.
it? It's called nagging. We do
Yeah.
it well.
Absolutely.
Especially when they don't do what you ask.
Yes. That brings up what I was thinking about, is that it is sometimes challenging to see that the dynamic is not your child not listening to you. It could be like, as in not listening, not wanting to do what you're saying. It could be, but I would go with what's really going on. What other dynamic? I was told once that until the age of 7, you should be able to do 7 things, something like that. And it was true with everyone except for my son. So this is the kid that is working on becoming a grandmaster in chess. Like, the kid is smart. Okay.
This is not about intelligence.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Uh-huh.
So instinctively, I'm like, you should be able to do 7 things, or at least 3. I'm like, but I also instinctively gave him a list of the top 5 things he needs to do in the morning.
As my ears fall out.
The top 5 things that he needs to do, I wrote it down on a list where he grabs his clothes in the morning. And I didn't see a magic thing, like a big transformation quickly, but it did help him. And I did it with pictures, even though he could read. So I intuitively did it. What you're saying.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Because we are with our kids every day,
Yeah.
called desperation.
Yeah, exactly.
we help them find a strategy. And then sometimes mamas are just smart enough that they figure, like, it's not even that you planned it out. It was this desperation moment that you're like, well, maybe this.
Yeah. Just keep trying.
Right. And then you find something and you're like, oh my goodness, that
It
works.
works. Yeah.
And it totally helped them, because this little girl is like in tears with,
Yeah.
I want to focus. I just can't.
Right.
Right. It's not disobedience.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's not
And
a
that,
relationship issue.
no, it really isn't. It feels like it when you're the mother,
Yeah.
but it isn't. It really is. It is really hard for them. Now, it's not to say they aren't sometimes disobedient,
Sure.
but it is saying it's harder for these kids. And I think when we can understand that, it changes everything.
Yeah.
It changes everything in your relationship with your child when you realize, okay, this is really hard for them. It's not the because even when you're teaching and you realize, wow, this, let me just check if this is an auditory or a visual or holding it in their memory
Yeah.
issue, struggle, all of a sudden you have more compassion, like, wow,
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
is really hard for you. And you are trying stinking hard.
You are, and you care.
And your kids trying so hard. They're working so
Yeah.
hard to please you, to do it well. And then when you're not pleased, they feel some shame.
It adds more stress. So the truth is, you're bringing up something from my own homeschool with
Oh.
my first child, of course, my experimental child. So I didn't learn math very well, basic math. And I believe that's because I had trauma in my brain. And so until I left home, I was not able to process a lot of things. And through math, you see, and Steve Demi's Decimal Street, I figured out
Yes.
some pretty basic stuff that I should have been able to figure out way back when, but I really didn't understand the process. And so then as a homeschool mom, I figured out a lot with this child. But the specific child, I remember a moment when we were on a trip in Nunavik and I was engaging some math concept with her. And I was just so frustrated, like, you're so smart. You can get this. Like, come on, let's do this. And how do I entice you or bribe you? Or how do I get mad enough to make you just, let's do it, focus. And yeah, and I say that because I know that that's going to speak to everyone at some point.
Absolutely.
And the truth is, I'm not proud that I was looking at her as though she was countering me. Instead, she was in her own, I think, disordered brain at that stage of her existence, not able to pull it together to get what I was doing. And it didn't mean she wasn't smart, though. That's the problem, is that she was smart, and it didn't make sense to me that she couldn't get this.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think that makes the reality of what we do as homeschool moms so real, because it is. My other daughter, has a child who likely, I mean, has ADHD symptoms, let's
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
And he will, she'll call me with, oh my goodness, like how many times I've had to tell him to do the same thing. Like what do I do? And I'm like, oh, tell him again.
Yeah. Trade him in for another
Right?
kid.
Yeah. I'm sure there are others. But then she sends me something to celebrate
Yeah.
that he's done. And then
Yeah.
I'll, celebrate with her. And she said, yeah, but it wasn't without some yelling.
I
Because
feel that.
that's the reality. It's our lives. We are trying to get them out the door, to get to lessons, swimming lessons on time. But
Right.
you've got a child who isn't following your directions. He also struggles auditorily. So, she tells him to do something and she, asks him, look at me, like, tell me what I said
Yep.
in order to repeat after me so that she knows he's got it. Because I'll
Yes.
say if he auditorily doesn't, he may not have processed everything you're telling him. I need you to go brush your teeth, grab your pants, get your skates, and come
Anything.
to the door in 5 minutes before we have to leave. And by then he's like, what am I doing?
Yes, I know. I know. And
And
that's actually,
I was reading this page and it's really great.
so I
This
mentioned my
book.
Legos. I saw them with my pants on the floor.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's why I think this is why I'm so passionate about identification, this assessment piece. Once we understand, once you have somebody to partner with you to sort of help you, like, almost discover, these weaknesses or these areas of need, let's call them, that your child has, all of a sudden you have more compassion and you have more understanding. It doesn't mean you're never going to raise your voice again, because you're
Yeah.
going to be frustrated that you can't get out the door because you started a little late and
Mhm.
now they
Yeah.
can't catch up. But
Yeah.
it does help you understand that he's not trying to be disobedient.
Right. Actually, and I think that when you're speaking about understanding them, because that is a huge component of this, there's also an element of understanding you and understanding what's triggering you. And if you actually have a predictable routine of what I call self-awareness strategies, that you're actually looking at your triggers, your reactiveness, and saying, okay, what's going on? What's the scene right now? Who's involved in this? And is this happening again and again and again and again? Okay, what's going on?
Totally.
Because maybe it speaks to something bigger than you see in the moment.
Well, and maybe it's a self-reflection of you.
Of course. Yeah.
Lots of this is genetic, and so perhaps you have these auditory struggles or these
Oh,
ADHD symptoms, and you've survived it
yeah.
and even come above it
Hmm.
and manage well with it. But now you see it in your child, and you're like, oh my goodness.
I do not have time for this. Yes.
I do not have time for this.
That's every
Right.
mother's response.
It is our
Yeah.
response. And that's the beauty of homeschooling. It's
Hmm.
not the place to say, oh, therefore I can't homeschool, but actually it's the place to say, because of that, I'm the best person to help him,
That's right. Yeah, it
right? To
really
be
is.
able to say, I get it, whether it's me or my husband. I'll have many times parents together in a meeting, and one of them will say, oh my goodness, like, this feels like me. It feels like it's about me. This is what I struggled with, and I don't want my child to. What we need to do to help them.
And you don't have to be the only one to help them.
No, exactly.
Yeah. So, what are the frequently asked questions when you first meet a family? Or maybe things that you hear online before they meet you?
Yeah, I think it depends if they've been in school or not.
Okay. Yeah.
If they've been in school, the question is, will I be able to, the normal questions that homeschoolers wonder.
Hmm.
If they've been homeschooled, I would say, they're, I think, should we be assessed? Should I get them assessed? Why should I?
Hmm.
Right. Another frequently asked, and I think I've talked about why. Another frequently asked question really is, will they ever learn to read? What kind of curriculum? Which of course is going to depend on that assessment. Again, once you can say, oh, well, they're really weak auditorily. I'm going to have to use a lot of pictures to help this child
Hmm.
understand and bring that together. Um, I don't know. I'm not really coming up with any more. But you know what else? I
Yeah.
feel really bad, but I'm just seeing that my battery's low and I
Oh,
got to grab
oh
my
no.
cord.
Yeah. Go. That's okay.
So, so talk amongst yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Talk amongst yourselves. Perfect. So if you're watching and you're waiting, then put your questions in the comment section down below because I am regularly chatting with Diane and I can always ask her questions after. Or you can join her community if you wonder if your child has unique learning challenges, because she's actually just creating a community where you can connect on all the questions and concerns you have. And if you haven't heard already, Diane is one of the people I've interviewed on my podcast about her educational therapy. What would you call it? Organization?
Practice.
Practice. Thank you. Yeah. So
There,
interesting.
I heard I'm back. Yeah.
That was so funny right there because also because of my trauma background, I know I have a hard time with recalling nouns. Are you familiar with these? You must be if you've learned about polyvagal theory.
Yeah, a little. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've learned that that is a challenge for me. But as an example, I am a, practical case, I guess, of having gone beyond what I could have been expected to learn
Mm.
or how I would have engaged. Because how I was in grade 2 in my math class, or even grade 12 in my math class, and how I engage things now, I don't have the level of frustration when I'm looking at things that are not my forte. I
Mm.
don't feel afraid of it anymore. And I can tackle things that I would never have expected I would be able to 20, 30, 30, 40 years later.
Stop! Only 40 years later. Yeah.
Seriously,
Well,
how old am
I,
I?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that piece of trauma, trauma is huge and it comes in all different forms.
Mhm.
And, you may say, well, I've had trauma and I might go, oh my goodness, you had trauma, like, oh, but maybe some of our own kids have had trauma. And what does that look like? Trauma comes in such different degrees,
Mhm.
you know. Some of our, I would say, lots of our adopted kids, of course, have come through some trauma experiences, just the fact. But I mean, we have had traumatic experience because we went through the pandemic,
Mhm. Yep.
right? And so that whole polyvagal theory just says, the science of feeling safe. How do we feel safe? And for some of our kids, and certainly those that have taken their kids out of public school, who have rescued them, some have just taken them out because we felt like, we really wanted to homeschool our kids and it was our responsibility, so we're going to do it. But
Mhm.
some of us are rescuing kids from the public system because it's been a bad experience for their unique learners. And
Yeah.
so they have had some trauma,
Right.
right? And so we are now helping them in the safety of our home to feel safe. But that doesn't mean that as my voice level rises as a mom, that trauma is not triggered.
Yes. That's
And
right.
so therefore, they react and throw their pencil and you know, and you're like, I'm just trying to help you.
Mhm.
But their response is because of their experience. And so we want to, always think, how do we help them regulate that? How do we regulate even
Mhm.
ourselves?
It starts there. That's my experience because I've been in the homeschool where I don't even know who I am, let alone
Mm,
how am I feeling. That was my first few years of homeschooling, which was well into my parenting years. And then learning about, really, it was a Brene Brown video that helped me
mm,
understand that I need to be vulnerable and authentic, and that I wasn't taking care of myself at all, or I didn't have any sense of myself. And then I've moved into all sorts of paths that I explore. um,
mm,
you know, I'll speak to the one that speaks right here. It is the self-compassion practice, actually
Mhm.
being aware of my own triggers, my own emotions, and
Mm.
how to self-soothe, as they call it,
Mm. Yeah.
actually make myself feel okay so that I can bring myself to a place of not angst, not angry, not reactive, and not afraid.
Mm.
Instead, just feeling like, okay, you're okay. I say to me, you're okay. And when I come down, turns out I am less likely to trigger my kids because I'm not yelling, I'm not intense, or I'm not choosing certain words that might trigger a reaction in them.
Beautiful. So beautiful. Like that whole, it's self-regulation. Like
Yeah.
it's not control. It's not like,
Mhm.
because cognitively, so this is the thing that is hard with our kiddos, is that, we want them to, well, I'm really falling apart today. We want them to use self-control,
Mhm.
but cognitively, they can't just make themselves. You can't
Mhm.
make yourself. You have to find a strategy
Mhm.
to settle down,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? And whether that is, I see some of my kids with their kids doing the, let me breathe with you.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath while they're freaking out. And
Mhm.
I'm looking at them like, wow, that really works. They take a deep breath with me. Here, we'll breathe together.
But it only works, and this is what I learned in myself, it only works if I'm regulated and if I'm not feeling triggered by the intensity of their emotion.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then that's like the self work first. Yeah. That's literally the story of my parenting. It is the
That's
reason I
beautiful.
began this all. And if
Mhm.
somebody asked me a couple months ago, so do you see some tangible shifts when you engage like that? And instantly, I don't mean that everything's utopia. No. And it isn't utopia in here either. As, and yet there is a remarkable shift when you're coming down like this and you're just, okay, I'm okay, even though my child is losing their stuff in the child department of the Bay. Not specific. I'm
Not that I'm triggering a memory or anything.
exactly. It's okay that even some random stranger is worried and comes over to say, "Are you okay?" Mostly, is it okay? I'm
I
like,
think I'm okay.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Actually, can I take a break? Can I go get a coffee and you stay here with her? No,
Yeah,
I'm
I'll be okay then.
yeah, I need to go get a cappuccino. No, actually, I'm okay. She's okay. Yeah, we're okay. And that's just practiced. And sometimes you do it well, and sometimes you don't.
Right,
But if
exactly.
you have that self-awareness practice where you're always going back to, I don't know, journaling, that's my big thing, or having a mindfulness moment in the day and
Mhm.
scheduling that in to just get used to asking yourself, how am I feeling? Or, practicing a pause when you are feeling triggered by your
Mhm.
child, then going away, looking in the mirror and asking yourself, are you okay? You're okay. And
Mhm.
talking to yourself like a friend, then you can bring yourself down. In
Mhm.
fact, I mean, just as an aside, I have found that if I speak to a friend or if I speak to my husband in a moment where I'm triggered, I am not as soothed. And maybe it's just me, but they sometimes come on board to help me be cheerleaded into feeling offended by my child, which isn't useful for me.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas if I talk to myself, then it's like, oh, I'm so sorry that you feel so frustrated and you look so
Mhm.
sad. And yeah, it is hard. And you love
Mhm.
them and they're amazing. And what are you really seeing right now? What's really going on? And then it seems to soothe better.
Well, it's a little bit like you see your children, you've put them to bed and you've gone through the frustration of it, and then an hour later you see them asleep and you're like, oh my goodness,
So perfect.
it's utopia.
I
It's the
know.
most beautiful thing ever. And you're like, I love them to bits, but
Yeah.
man, did they trigger me.
Yes.
And I think that when you have a unique learner and
Mm,
you're homeschooling, whether that's a struggle with reading or a difficulty with understanding math, or it's, difficulty with focusing and the nagging of getting them back, or it's a behavioral, they've lost their mind, because you asked them to do 3 problems instead of 1 or something.
Yeah.
Though it's not an easy job. And those are triggering, because in our minds, we looked at another homeschooler and it looked so easy, or it sounds so easy, or Facebook made it look pretty, or something.
Yeah.
And we have to deal with our reality that this isn't as easy as we had maybe anticipated.
Yeah.
And so then we have to look at, and sometimes as moms, then we even can feel trapped because there's this feeling of, I couldn't even send them to school if I wanted. Because what are they going to do with them?
Right.
And so that sometimes can make us feel a little
right.
And I think that's when we have to step back and look at, okay, what's really going on, and what's the most important thing. And in our membership this month, it's like creating a balance in your life where you can say, how do I create this balance of homeschooling that actually says, okay, homeschooling isn't sucking everything out of me.
That's right.
But instead, what can we do to help this child feel like school is not strangling them?
Absolutely. Yeah. Is it working for you? That's my question. I always open a conversation if somebody's asking me specifically about homeschool things, because I go all over the place with life coaching. But if it's specifically about homeschooling, then what do you believe in education to be anyway? Because the root word for education is educato, it means, I know that because I'm a homeschool mom, but to raise up. And so what are you raising up? And like, what do you understand as what an education is? And I'm not prescriptive, because I genuinely think that we all have different ideas of what it should be, or what it could be. But then, is it working for you the way you're actually putting it into practice?
Totally.
And if it's not working for you, okay, then let's talk. How can we shift things? Because, someone quizzed me, and it actually felt like quizzing me when I was doing a live event a couple of weeks ago. And he's a long-term homeschooler. And he said, so what is your homeschool philosophy? And I went, well, I have sampled them all, most of them.
I've sampled.
And I would say, who is the child in front of you? That's your goal, is to educate that child. Ta-da! That's it. Yeah. And
that's the philosophy.
Yeah. And get good luck with that, because that child is still not an open book for you.
Nor with a manual.
Right. Exactly.
You have to figure it out.
Right.
But my mantra, throughout all last week in my homeschool unique learner group was like, your child best.
Yes.
Period. Don't second guess it. I may have had training and this, that, and the other, but I want to find out from you as the mom. Tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. So because you do know your child, and even when we do general screening assessments, we don't do psych eds, but we do general, when we come back and we start to share, this is what we see here, and this is what we see. Does this make sense to you? Were you seeing this at home? Which parts of this sort of resonate with you, and which parts are like, I would never have guessed?
Right.
And like 99% of the time, the parent says, yeah, I know all this.
Right.
So then me as a tester can think, well, that was a waste of their time and money. But actually it wasn't. It was validating to say, exactly. I know my kid, but now I have more tools to say, wow, I didn't realize that was impacting them that much.
Right, exactly. Even coming at it from a nursing background as a pediatric nurse, when kids or when the parents saw the child and said they are not well, something is up, they were almost always right. I say almost always because there really is a scenario where they might not be right, for a variety of reasons. But when the child is unwell in the hospital and they're better, and the mom says, I think he's fine, they're almost always right. And you can't give a discharge based on a mother's opinion, but I always thought, well, why not? They know, they do know. They know when something's up and they know when they're okay.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we as moms can stop putting expectations on our kiddos that don't that aren't attainable,
Yeah.
then they're free to learn and grow
Mhm.
as they can. And I think I mean this with, recently I was talking to a parent whose child is maybe reading at a grade 1 level
Mhm.
according to my standardized testing,
Yeah.
but they're using grade 5 material,
Mm.
language arts or literature, and well, they can do it. And I said, yes, but can they do it? Or are you really providing the answers, guiding them through, because you want them to complete grade 5 curriculum, when really could we give them grade 2 and say, let's attain this part so that you can do this part so that you
Yes.
can do this part.
Yeah.
And
So it's kind
so
of like we're trying to prove something to somebody that I know that was me. I mean, there's a reason I lasted so long with well-trained mind in my homeschool. I tried very hard to enact a well-trained mind, Susan Wise
mhm,
Flowers book, and a sunlight curriculum all at the
yep.
same time, and do that for about 4 years until I really didn't like it. And I was really looking for the yellow bus. I really was. Yeah. And that was
Right.
just like to prove something to me, ultimately, that I am capable to the task of dot, 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 that other people can see that I can put a private school in my home and I'll be amazing. And no, that's not the point of reference for our homeschools. It's not to validate my sense of worth. It is, who is the child in front of you? How can we help them? And so when you're saying yeah, theoretically, maybe you could get a grade 5 level, but or comprehension, but maybe it would be beneficial for his confidence and his ease and your ease if you bring it down a bit.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's so, so, so true. And maybe even laying aside our desire. Like maybe you hear about well-trained mind or classical ed, or you hear Charlotte Mason, and you
Yeah.
go, oh, that sounds so amazing. And
It
that's what I want to do,
is. Yes.
because they make it sound like it's the answer and it's the
Mhm.
best way.
Yep.
Oh, there's lots of best ways.
There are lots of best ways, and some of them are really expensive. Don't do it. Yeah.
Right. But some of them, it's not that you need that education in order to succeed in all of life.
Right. In fact, I really do think that less is more, no matter how academic they are, because I'm not really interested in doing the formal things to kids that are like pulling me into, okay, I got to do something more to help, encourage more. I don't know. They want more, and I know they want more. And I've had both. I've sometimes had both, even in the same child. But your goal is to allow them to just explore things or keep putting things in their space and help them, discover new things. It doesn't have to be expensive. It could be a library card. You don't have
Totally.
to make it complicated. But ultimately, you're not tied to a philosophy. You're not dedicated to the philosophy. You're dedicated to the child.
And especially for our kids that learn differently.
Yeah.
Because we could get so, like, we know that what's important is for them to do some reading, to do some writing, and to do some math.
For the purpose
And
of their brain development.
um no, hold on, let me finish. What I'm trying to say is we as homeschool moms think that we know that reading, writing, and math is important for future success in education.
Yeah.
And so that they become the most important, the 3 R's, which, you know what, they are. But we also want them to have a rounded life learning and love of learning about the world around them.
Right.
And when we only focus on these three, because we're, that takes all of our day, because they struggle with reading and they struggle with writing and they struggle with math, and it's 3 o'clock and I'm done. Right? If that takes all of your day, and then you don't have enough time to go to the library and explore and build their interests,
Mm-hmm.
the things that actually they're going to really need in their lives.
Yeah.
As much as the reading, writing, and math. So we need both. And it would be easy, we can get sidetracked, I guess, into just pounding on the reading, writing, and math.
Yeah. And you
With
just
these
have to ask
kids.
yourself, when is it good enough? When have you met your own expectation in that? That was actually the podcast episode that I released today, was how do you know what you're doing is good enough? And at base, I think we as mothers always struggle with this concept of good enough. Because what are we trying to accomplish? Let's say specifically in our homeschools, what are we trying to accomplish? Is it better than the school system? What is the purpose? And it always goes back to the child, not to all the other things that people talk about, like the philosophy or curriculum or a pretty Pinterest board or TikTok, I guess, is the thing right now. But yeah.
Totally. And when they're finished and you're done, and that's the benefit of being older, is we can look back and say, wow, he got to grade 12 and I went, you're done. Right? Did all the boxes get checked? No. Did he complete every, credit in every subject? Nope. But you're done. And now, now the hindsight, clear sight piece can say, he's an airplane mechanic and he leads a team at Pearson Airport, and he built his own house from scratch and has 2 children and a lovely wife, and he's caring and he serves people. And did it matter that he didn't do all his credits?
Exactly. It sounds like hypothetical.
Well, right. It just kind of helps us, hindsight is clear sight when you're in it. And
Yes.
so sometimes I feel like the disadvantage for all moms listening is that you may leave, and that used to be me, feeling like that's nice for them all to say, but
I know.
I have this child and they don't understand how
Mhm.
hard it is. And I have a mother-in-law and I have a teacher friend who says they're not going to get into college if they don't have these all done. I
Mhm.
know all those discussions because I've also had to walk through.
Me too. Check, 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 check. Me too. Yeah. Literally that list.
So it's hard. And so
Yeah.
I don't want to at all come across of you guys should stop worrying,
Mm-hmm.
because we do. We're the mom. And in some ways that's good, because that just helps us gain perspective
Yeah.
and reinforces inside of us, okay, I heard this person, they once said
Yes.
it's going to be okay. And those are the things that, and if anything, I would hope that your listeners, would come away with, one time I heard this person say it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And maybe that will be the clicker. Like for me, and I may have shared this with you, but my husband had a really bad car accident when my kids were like 10 and under. And,
Yeah.
we thought we were going to lose a whole year.
Mm.
And, people were really, this was back in 1993, people were really kind of worried for my kids
Mm.
and their academic, they're 10 and under. But anyways,
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
academic success of that year.
Yeah.
And all I knew was that I had read a book, a homeschool book of a family
Mm.
who did nothing for a whole year, and their kids still improved or
Go
accelerated a year.
on. Yeah. Hmm.
And I held on to that. I
Yeah.
was like, I just remember saying, well, I heard once. And now I'm going to hold on to that string to say, I'm just going to trust that they're going to be okay in a year. Because I didn't
Beautiful.
really believe it. I didn't know it. I didn't know if they would. I was like, well, I hope. And
Trust.
they were.
Yeah.
Trust.
Yeah. And so if you're listening, if you're watching, then you're hearing the same thing, that now it's not just Diane, it's Diane and the person that you read. And frankly, I have heard this story so many times, and it
Exactly.
turns out they're good. They're still learning. And all the things you were so concerned about, the perfect curriculum, or like yesterday, I was talking to a mom, getting all the BC learning outcomes in
Yeah.
a year because they're traveling for a year. I was like, nope, you do not need to satisfy every learning outcome. Every teacher does not satisfy every learning outcome. Don't make that the focus. Your child is 8. Just go, learn, be together, read a lot, count stuff,
Yeah.
add stuff, whatever, wherever they're at. You're going to learn so much just by being intentional about looking at the world and learning.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I had a conversation with someone on the phone this afternoon
Yeah.
or today, and she was sort of saying, her kid's in school, but he's been sent to the principal's office twice already, and so coming back, and what do I do, and how do I move forward, and what if I homeschool this year, but I decide not to next year? I said, well, I just
Okay.
bring him back to the school.
Yeah.
Oh, but what if, I said, well, if he moved from school to school, they'd learn different things, but they taught him some things,
Yep.
right? The same answers, but yeah, just giving ourselves the freedom, the weight off to say it's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay. It really is.
And
Yeah.
I think it's harder. I really think it's harder when we have unique learners because they aren't going to learn at a speedy speed perhaps, and so they are going to learn at a different rate, and so
Yeah.
it makes us feel more under the gun.
Yeah. And yet
And
you're probably most able to provide for them more than in a classroom.
that's what her and I exactly talked about. You will provide him with exactly what he needs,
Mm-hmm.
one-on-one, because she said he does lots for me.
And you'll notice it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, a teacher
Yeah.
always has at least 20, 25 kids in the class, if not more, and they are aware when somebody, or they're not aware, like you are aware when somebody's not quite getting something. You're aware.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure having you here and chatting about
Um,
all the things. Is there anything that you want to leave? I mean, that was a beautiful way to conclude, but is there anything
yeah,
else that you'd like to say to the homeschool mom?
yeah. Take a breath.
Mm.
Right? Really just take a breath and enjoy your kids
Mm.
because it will be gone before you know it, says the
Mm.
gray-haired woman.
Two of us.
It will be gone before you know it. And,
Mhm.
somehow, the days are long and the years, or the days, how does it go? The
Yeah,
days
the
are
days
long
are
and the
long and the years are
years
short.
are short.
It's true.
And they're on their way and launched. And so enjoy the time and follow their lead. What do they love to do? And pour into them because now's the time.
Beautiful. Thank you, Diane.
Yeah, no
Where do
problem.
where do we find you online?
Geerlinkslearning.com is my website. And on Facebook, we're homeschooling your unique learner.
Thank you for
I'd
being.
love to see you.
Yeah. Thanks for
You're
being.
welcome.